So the indigenous people decided to imitate them. They built as best they could fake radio operator booths with dummy radios, in which they too would request using fake microphones the
Mhm.
shipment of food, medicine, and other equipment they might need. Later, they even built fake airstrips waiting for planes to unload their cargo, presumably from their ancestral spirits. So hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of That's Audiophiles. My name's John. His name is Andy. Nobody's going to buy those rare copies. No one even remembers your first release. Under the bed, those triple XLTs. No wonder they said it was a dead end dream. More on that later. But first, because it's Friday, yes, it is. We are going to listen to a track selected by one of our wonderful viewers. Case in point is Neil Donaldson. I'm sure we have done a suggestion or two from Neil before. Um, he dropped a comment on our community page. Very nice of him to do so, but I don't recommend it because neither of us bother to look that often. So drop a comment in one of the episodes. But thanks, Neil, anyway. And he suggested that we haven't listened to anything by Mr. Mick Harvey, who is well known to us through his efforts on various bands and stuff and artists. But yeah, he's quite right. We haven't. So we are going to. Andy's going to listen to this one. He suggested the song Cargo Cult. So you remember who Mick Harvey is, Andy, obviously.
Obviously I don't know any about his independent stuff, divorced
Yeah.
from other bands or projects. So I'll be interested to learn more about him and this album. This is a cover though, right? Because the only reason I know any of that is on Into the Music. Greg, one of my favorite artists Greg gave me was Serge Gainsbourg, right? And it was Requiem pour un Con or something to that effect. And I really, really enjoyed that track to the point where I went out and listened to some of his other stuff. And this was one of it. I think there's an E at the end of cult, but I assume that's just a difference in spelling and language, right? So
Yes.
I'm not flying completely blind, but I've never heard obviously this iteration of it before, and I've certainly never heard Mick Harvey's solo material. So yeah, I can understand why I would be the guinea pig for this track. So I'm eager to give it a listen.
So we'll go off, do that, come back and tell myself, Neil, and all the other good folks what you think of it.
Will do.
I know of the sorcerers who summon the jets from the jungles of New Guinea. They survey the skies, coveting the money.
So obviously we're just very early on here, but outside of obviously the language being the largest difference between this and the source material, it sounds like it's going to stay pretty true to it, which is great. I mean, I've never really dug into what the lyrics translated to from the Serge Gainsbourg iteration of the song, the original. So, which is obviously in French, but so it's going to be interesting to. It already is interesting to hear some of these lyrics. I never knew what the song was about. I just liked the music in it. So if he kind of stays true to that, well, maybe like modernizing it a little bit, given how long ago Gainsbourg recorded that track, that'll be interesting to hear. But for me, I guess the main focus will also be on sort of the narrative here, because that's always been, even having heard the original, that's always been sort of a blind spot for me. So cool stuff. Let's pull it back and hear that opening lines. I didn't think we were going to get references to flying over Papua New Guinea or whatever, but here we are.
I know the sorcerers who summon the jets from the jungles of New Guinea. They survey the skies, coveting the money that pillaging will bring them from that freight. On the coral sea, in the wake of that machine, those creatures who have no need of reason, those papillons, they wait to see the wreck of an airbus.
I wonder what is causing that like buzzing sound. Like obviously I'm hearing like the interesting trill work or the pull off on the higher up on the bass neck, and then the guitar that's kind of playing with that, this shuffling but interesting drum beat, key tinkles here and there, but this buzzing through line that just appeared. What is that?
Of reason, those papillons, they wait to see the wreck of an airbus
It's a little
and
distorted.
of a comet. And because their totem hasn't ever been able to bring down either a Boeing or even a Fokker to the ground, they dream of hijacks and of collisions with gulls. Those naive shipwreckers, armed now with blowguns, who make sacrifice to the cargo cult, toward the sky and the aeroplanes. Their poison darts abound. Where are you, melody, and your lost frame? Is it haunting the archipelago, where the sirens are becalmed?
In the original, I remember there being this presence of like a female vocal track or multiple female vocal tracks that created this kind of choral effect, but this already sounds, I don't know, again, more modern, but it sounds like it's clearer, and I guess that's probably a part of that whole modernity thing. But yeah, really interesting. My God, for a spoken word song that is so easily discernible, I don't know what all these references are to these, like, this sort of more primitive island culture wanting to take down a plane, and who this melody individual is. I'm jotting down lines, but they look like the scrawlings of a inmate at an insane asylum, or some sort of serial killer. So let me pull this back a little bit. I really love the dynamics and the sound, how they fade in and fade out and swell and then diminish. There's a lot of that in the OG as well, so it's really cool to hear it in this one, too.
Where are you, melody, and your lost frame? Is it haunting the archipelago, where the sirens are becalmed? sorcerers still hope in vain for planes to be brought to the ground. Having nothing to lose, nor a God to believe in, so that they might return my trivial passions. I, like them, I call to the night cargo planes. Hold on to that hope of an aviation disaster that would bring melody back again. A child taken captive by the lure of the stars there. What was your name?
Melody.
Melody.
Melody Nelson.
Okay. What an interesting little snippet of lyrical content. Where, like, if I was certain of anything after listening to the song to this point, was that he was very familiar with this Melody individual, and now, towards the latter part of the song, I don't know if there's going to be more exposition from here or not, but at the latter portion of the song, he's inquiring about who she is, when to this point, once she was introduced in the song, it seemed like he had all the certainty in the world as to who she was, so much so that he missed her. So odd, interesting, not bad, but just odd. And this sort of disembodied, distant response to his question makes it seem like she's like ghostly, like the specter of Melody Nelson, was it, has just appeared on the set.
What was your name?
Melody.
Melody.
Melody Nelson.
That bass is great. everything was all a bit muddled there for the last, I don't know what that was, 45 seconds or whatever to a minute. And then right on that beat that hit by the strike there, by the drums, it seemed like a veil was lifted, like this, and there was so much clarity to the sound, which is really interesting given what, the sound quality of what preceded it. Also, the sound quality that preceded it was fabulous. It was just very muddy, I'm sure intentionally. So you're sifting through all of it, and then all of a sudden there's this like almost like a musical epiphany when that drum beat or that comes down. Yeah, this was overall fairly true to the original cover, which is, I'm fine with that. I mean, more often than not, I do love when something has been reimagined completely because it lets you like look at it from a different angle completely. But this was, I think a big part of what made this so enjoyable was that sort of evolution of the production quality that you got to see here on display here with this track. So that added to it. The choral vocals were fabulous. It was really, really interesting to hear the lyrical content in English for the first time, and to try and make sense of it, even though I failed miserably. I mean, I caught bits and pieces. There was a lot of talk about cargo planes over Papua New Guinea, and I guess what the people who populate that area would think of an airplane, and then the sort of desire for it to have some sort of accident that would then bring it to Earth, because God knows their dart guns isn't going to do the trick. But all really weird. I don't know if this is like a metaphor for something or if it's literal. Either way, just two different levels of strange or a bit of oddity to that narrative. Interesting. I'm not against it. I'm just, for a first listen in my native language, it's really a curveball that I wasn't expecting to be thrown. All that said, I mean, musically, this is really interesting. That kind of thrummy bass that also obviously populates for a good period of the song, this sort of higher area on the neck, that do 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 do, that sort of like almost melodic line that the bass is playing. Very cool, very earwormy. Really enjoyed that. The sonic textures of the guitar that would sort of come and go added a whole lot to it. Same thing with the tinkling piano notes at times. And the drums had all of this like laissez-faire kind of attitude about them in the opening bit, but then, I mean, you'd be hard pressed not to give them the roses for the last, leg of this track, where they're doing a lot of really fun and interesting stuff, moving around from snare to toms and all that fun business. So yeah, I really enjoyed this track. I thought it was a really sound cover, and really, it wasn't reimagined, but it was reinvigorated, and I appreciate that and really enjoyed giving this one a listen. So I'd really like to learn more about what inspired the cover and maybe more about the artist himself. So let's get back to John.
Chateau Neuf du Pape, he's back. So you've had to listen to Cargo Goat by Mick Harvey. What do you reckon?
I reckon that this was a really fun listen. I will say that overall, there wasn't a huge divergence from the original material, but it was, I think, obviously enough time had passed. At least I don't know when this particular track came out, but I know when the original came out, and this sounds, soaked in modernity in comparison. So to hear that sort of update, if you will, on and to some degree reimagining of certain parts, though they still stayed true to the original, was a lot of fun from just a comparative sense. You know what I mean? Like going back in your mind to the original and then hearing what they did with this. Also, I think the most interesting part, obviously, is hearing this narrative that's being spun, but in English, because I never cared to look up the lyrics when I heard it before, because there was all this really interesting, with a lot of Serge Gainsbourg stuff, there's this really interesting stuff musically that's happening. So that's what drew me the first, I don't know, however many times I've listened to this up until now, 5, 6. Um, so it was really interesting to hear what was being said. I don't want to say sung, I'd be using that term too loosely, but it was oddly, it makes about the same amount of sense to me, even in English, as it did the first few times when I heard it in French. But we will cross or burn that bridge when we get to it. So the song begins in the same fashion as the source material, as the thrumming notes of the bass intermingle with these tinkling notes on the piano just before and whilst the vocals begin to unfold. That simple and slightly, rattly drum drops, and as soon as our narrator begins to deliver the vocals, and here Harvey continues to stay true to Gainsbourg's original, by delivering the lines in this sort of cool, calm, and collected fashion, which could either come off as really confident or really unnerving, because there's also like maybe a slight tinge of dissociation in that voice as well. So it's a little bit like, ugh. And he's obviously using the spoken word delivery, and it's in English rather than French, as I noted a moment ago. And just before the 1 minute mark, there appear these sort of long, stretched out, buzzing notes. And that was the only thing that I found really hard to like pinpoint as to what was creating that. I didn't know if that was some sort of manufactured sound from a keyboard, or if it was like this affected guitar noise that briefly made an appearance. But it was really interesting, and again, it had this kind of stretched out feeling to it that we've used this term a million times, and we'll probably use it a million more because it's something that's used in music often. But it adds this texture to the song, to the music, and there's a lot of that in Serge's music, and there's a lot of that on display in this track. That Mick Harvey to this point has, expertly covered. This gives way to some traditional piano notes intertwined with the feedback of some guitar. And the narrative is not at all what I had expected, as someone who has heard this song before a few times, but always latched on to the music given the language barrier. And now with this veil lifted, I am perhaps more confused than before, but also I'm more intrigued. He sings of this cargo jet flying over Papua New Guinea, and then seems to construct this narrative about their perception of the plane, and what this might carry, and how they might ransack it. He alludes to their inability to bring it down, though they dream of hijacks and of like collisions with seagulls or something like that. Anything to bring the plane down to them is what I'm inferring here. And again, this is not the picture that I would have. I mean, you could have given me a million fucking tries to tell you what I thought the French delivered version of this was, and I never would have landed on people in Papua New Guinea looking up at a cargo jet and pondering the ways that they could bring this thing down. He then mentions how they were armed with blowguns, and then how they make sacrifice to the cargo cult as as they train their dart guns in position toward the sky. The distorted guitar whines and bends away, worrying at notes, while the piano, bass, and drums keep up this sort of bouncy rhythm. And then in the midst of this very obscure narrative, he all of a sudden begins pondering the whereabouts of someone named Melody. Did she crash into the islands, or the waters surrounding the archipelago? Or, is she hanging on to the plane? Really interesting stuff here. I didn't know we were going to get a melody in this. During this, and I don't mean the musical term, during this verse, there are some outstanding choral vocals that have this ethereal lift to them, which I do recall from the original, but they were kind of turned up to 11 here. Obviously, modern production and recording technology will allow for that. But it sounded more like three women in a booth, you know, providing vocal tracks in the last one, whereas this sounded almost like an instrument in itself, the way it was produced and the way it lifted everything else around it. I really, really enjoyed this. And they appear again in the next verse, which then gives way to this interesting motif on the bass as the guitar writhes around the soundscape, like the last efforts of a dying fish on a shoreline. The bass is really interesting here because the bass is kind of given this injection of melody. It's this like melodic through line rather than a rhythmic piece, which we've highlighted and underscored before in previous tracks. It's not something we've haven't seen or heard before, but it doesn't happen often. And when it does, and to me, this was like the earwormy, hooky part of the whole song, that little bit on the bass there, which I really, really enjoyed. Then he admits to holding on to hope for some aviation disaster that would bring this melody back again, and describes her as a child taken captive by the lure of the stars, which is a really great line. This is all really, really interesting and well written, but alas, I'm not really piecing together a cohesive narrative. The music swells yet again before it hits a wall around the 4:37 mark as things come to a halt, with, you know, kind of like over 2 minutes left in the track. So I knew that this was like a false stop. But then the bass thrum hits just as Harvey asks, "What was your name?" And a woman's almost ghostly, disembodied voice answers, "Melody," prompting him to inquire further, "Melody what?" And she obliges Melody Nelson. Now, I thought this almost made me laugh out loud because I'm like, he was singing with all the confidence of the world about this melody that he missed, and that surely only you can miss something that you're familiar with and know. And then he's over here asking like, Melody and Melody what again was it? It just seemed like really odd that he didn't know her name or her full name, yet preceding all of this he seemed to miss her presence. Go on.
Just because I'll forget later on, I didn't make note of that. That bit there is a memory from earlier in the album.
Oh, thank you. And that makes so much more sense. And you know what? Equipped with just that quick little bit of
The
information.
first time the two of them spoke.
Yeah, and the way it's produced and packaged here, it's like the ghostly thing. It sounds like a memory. It sounds like something that he's recalling from the past. So that checks out. Thank you. So the bass then continues to meander as the ethereal choral vocals begin to swell again, and the drums do a nice little roll, and it brings back this interesting bass motif from earlier that bounces between notes, and the music grows and grows, almost becoming a cacophony of sound, very muddy, that comes like close to like really blurring all together. And the drums fire off some nice rolls and fills, mostly trained on the snare, and the guitar begins to scream. All the while, those choral vocals continue to lift until the 6:41 mark when the drums hit one emphatic splash. And from here, everything comes back down to earth, almost like an airplane. Uh, so I thought that that was really interesting, right? I mean, this could almost be the turbulence and loss of control, and then the downward spiral of a plane crashing down into, I don't know, let's say Papua New Guinea. And so, yeah, this was a very true to the original cover, save for the English lyrics and the clearer, crisper production quality. And while it didn't break away or redefine the song sound or packaging, it was really well done. And I enjoyed this a lot, even despite my confusion surrounding the lyrics and the narrative, which I'm hoping that you can shed some light on. And when you do so, that'll kind of like polish everything up and put a bow on it for me because this was a really great listen and a great shout. So thanks, Neil, for offering this one up.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Andy. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Serge Gainsbourg.
Oh, really?
I find some of his stuff problematic for various reasons. Music, some of it's really great, some of it I don't like. This album, I actually, where this song comes from, I grabbed the whole album and I listened to it. And the opening song and this song are the two strongest songs by a long way,
Okay.
in my opinion. Not in everybody else's opinion.
Yeah.
That's all. But we'll get into that. But this is an interesting selection for many reasons, which we'll get into, and I'll try and cover as much as I can. I'll see how long this episode goes on for, because there's a lot to say. So, Michael John Harvey, he was born in Rochester, Victoria, in Australia. He's a musician, singer-songwriter, composer, arranger, and record producer, multi-instrumentalist. He is best known for his long-term collaborations with Nick Cave, with whom he formed The Boys Next Door, The Birthday Party, and Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. He's also done a lot of work with PJ Harvey, which we spoke about the channel as well. So he met Nick Cave and also Phil Calvert and Tracy Pugh at school in the early 70s. They formed a band with Cave on vocals, Harvey guitar, Calvert on drums, and other students on other stuff. And they used to play at parties and school functions with a repertoire of these usual suspects here for the 70s: Lou Reed, David Bowie, Roxy Music, Alice Cooper, and the sensational Alex Harvey Band, amongst others. So fast forward through Birthday Party and into Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Throughout the 80s and 90s, Harvey was usually charged with the production of the recordings, along with Cave and guitarist Blitz the Bargouts. In addition to co-writing many of the band's songs and putting together most of the string arrangements and other orchestration. He was often perceived as the sort of musical director for the band, and also managed much of the band's business affairs as well, right up until his departure. So he remained with the Bad Seeds for 25 years, featuring in 14 albums, the last of which was Dig, Lazarus Dig. And after his last show in Perth, Australia in January 2009, he cited both professional and personal factors as reasons for leaving. Regarding Cave, Harvey informed the media, in quotes, "I'm confident Nick will continue to be a creative force and that this is the right time to pass on my artistic and managerial role to what has become a tremendous group of people who could support him in his endeavours, both musically and organisationally." And the following year in 2010, he explained further his frustration with song arrangements strained his relationship with Cave. And also there was a desire to spend more time with family as a significant reason for leaving the Bad Seeds. Split marked the end of 36-year-long collaboration between Harvey and Cave. So he then went on to, during this time, he already started his solo career. So his first debut studio album was called Intoxicated Man in October 95. And it was the first album also of interpretations/translations of Serge Gainsbourg songs. He then followed up with 3 more albums of songs by Mr. Gainsbourg: Pink Elephants, Delirium Tremens, and Intoxicated Women. So Intoxicated Women is the 8th studio album by Mick Harvey, and it was released in January 2017, which is where this song comes from. Personnel: Mick Harvey, vocals, guitar, piano, organ, drums, bongos, cabasa. JP Shiloh, guitar, slide guitar, vocals. Bertram Bugalat, bass, and also Glenn Lewis, bass. Toby Dammit and Hugo Cram, drums. Steve Shelley, hi-hat, tambourine. I believe that's Sonic Youth drummer. Yo-Yo Rome, organ, piano, ebow. And then strings were Anouk Roos, Biddy Connor, Bronwyn Henderson, Dahlia Amapopoulos, Lizzie Walsh, Pauline Houseworth, and Vincent Castelliscu. All the rainbow of the surnames there. And also the choir on Cargo Colts was Julitha Ryan, Nick Harvey, and Zante Waite. There were some other guests, Brendan Conlon, trumpet on one of the tracks, not this one. And then there were lots of guest vocals mimicking sort of Serge Gainsbourg's sort of output, particularly with people like Jane Birkin or whatever. So Andrea Schroeder, Shrey Kampfe, Zante Waite, Jessica Ribeiro, Sophia Brose, Lyndell Jane Spirit, and his son, Solomon Harvey, were all guest vocals throughout this album. So a little right up here as the grand finale of Harvey's four-part, decades-long project translating the work of French provocateur Serge Gainsbourg into English. This track tackles one of Gainsbourg's most sacred texts, Cargo Cult, the sweeping closer of the legendary 1971 concept album Histoire de Melanie Nelson. Its narrative follows an illicit romance which develops between the middle-aged narrator and a 14-year-old girl, Melanie Nelson.
Now I understand why you described it as problematic. And why I should have left it in French and not done any sort of digging into the lyrical content. Oh.
Portrayed on the album and its cover art by Gainsbourg then partner Jane Birkin. So on the cover, she's got a red wig on. She's also playing a schoolgirl. She's got a crop top and a pair of jeans, which are rolled down slightly because she is starting to show in real life her pregnancy. So yeah, interesting. Histoire de Melanie Nelson is considered by many critics and fans to be Gainsbourg's most influential and accomplished work, as well as one of the greatest French language albums in popular music history. It currently has a Metacritic score of 96.
Yeah.
And yeah, interesting. So here's the plot, which is the plot of the whole album. While recklessly driving his Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost one night, the album's unnamed narrator is distracted by the silver statue in his car's hood and collides with a young red-headed girl on a bicycle. The two exchange information after the accident, and the girl introduces herself as Melody Nelson. And this is in the opening song, Melody. And that's where you get that exchange, which you highlighted.
Right. Yeah.
The narrator falls instantly in love with Melody, who is revealed to be only 14 years old in the next song, Ballad de Melody Nelson, but who nonetheless makes the narrator happier than he can ever imagine, which he fills out in the song Valse de Melody. He plans to take her virginity, knowing she has never been in love before. The track Melody, which is basically her giggling and laughing as he's kind of tickling her and stuff, and that's Jane Birkin doing those votes. It's really fucking creepy. Yeah. They then travel to a secret hotel where they have sex, l'Hôtel Particulier. Afterwards, Melody boards a cargo plane to return home to Sunderland, England, but an autopilot malfunction causes it to crash, killing her, or Melody. The narrator laments Melody's death and compares his misguided hope that she might return one day to the cargo cults of Melanesia, wondering if they caused the plane's crash and finding himself unable to think of anyone or anything else. Cargo cult, the song. So yeah, I didn't find in that anywhere any sort of recognition that this was kind of a problematic story. I mean, there is, 1971, there was different attitudes back then, but it was still illegal and what we would call statutory rape. And if you don't believe me, ask Roman Polanski. So yeah, it's a little bit problematic that, nevertheless,
it's not a little bit problematic. When something's problematic, it is just problematic, and that's exactly what it is.
It's not recanting real life, obviously.
Yeah.
But this is his fantasy, so
it's depicting something that's problematic. That's for sure.
Yes, exactly. Moving on. Translating Gainsbourg's complex wordplay is notoriously difficult, but Harvey is a seasoned expert at preserving the rhyming, the meter, and the meaning. And it struck me in this because I listened to it in French, obviously, as you did. Mm-hmm. I've seen the French text, and I've seen a sort of automatic translation, and then I've seen Harvey's translation, which is more lyrical and poetic than the straight translation. And that's the skill. It's not literally just saying what it means, but then put it in something that becomes a meter, that you can sing or spoken sing. And it reminds me of Anthony Burgess, the famous novelist. He translated Cyrano de Bergerac for the film into English or the subtitles, and they were like poetry. It was unbelievably good. Joe Duppertu's version of Sooner version.
Speaking of
Fantastic.
problematic Frenchmen.
Yeah. So on Cargo Cult, Harvey foregoes singing entirely, opting instead for a cool, heart-spoken whisper. I very much like Serge. His deep, gravelly Australian delivery provides the perfect surrogate for Gainsbourg's original louche baritone. He delivers lines about New Guinea sorcerers, modern machinery, and crashing airplanes with a detached, poetic reverence.
Mm-hmm.
By stripping away the language barrier for English speakers without losing the bizarre storytelling, Harvey highlights the sheer brilliance of the narrative poetry. All Music said of this track, the closer is a reading of the classic Cargo Cult from Melody Nelson. It's fuzzed out psych guitars, rumbling acoustic pianos, and tight snares and noisy drama as Harvey narrates the apocalyptic action. Harvey sends off his final Gainsbourg project with the same spirit he introduced it with, savvy, humour, and an illuminating musical and literary spirit that defies anyone to follow him. The Clash wrote, still, for every earnest piece here, there's some of the finest moments. This is talking about the whole album, Mick Harvey's album. Some of the finest moments on Intoxicated Women are given over to some insanely groovy and frankly bonkers songs. As with any Harvey project, the musicianship is of the highest yet understated order. The multi-instrumentalist Harvey and longtime collaborator J.P. Shiloh have a keen ear for quality arrangements, here augmenting Gainsbourg's words with beautiful strings and sensitive musical backdrops that perfectly complement the endless mystique of Harvey's muse. This album may finally conclude the project that Mick Harvey set about tentatively back in 1995, but that much time spent with the music of your idol will inevitably and wonderfully find a receptive outlet in Harvey's own work. So the lyrics, really interesting stuff here, and this sort of imagery is put together. I know of sorcerers who summon the jets. That's a great opening line.
Yeah.
From the jungles of New Guinea, they survey the skies, coveting the money. That in the original, it's actually guineas, because he's playing on the word New Guinea and then guineas as in English, coins, money. That pillaging would bring them from the freight. On the Coral Sea, in the wake of that machine, those creatures that have no need of reason, those Papuans wait to see the wreck of an Airbus and of a Comet. In the original, it's Viscount and Comet, which are both British planes. And because their totem hasn't ever been able to bring down either a Boeing or even a Fokker to the ground. Again, in the original, it was a DC-4, but I guess Fokker sounds better. They dream of hijacks and of collisions with gulls. I think in the original, it's something like Bird Strike. Again, collision with gulls is just more poetic, I think. Those native shipwreckers arms now with blowguns who make sacrifice to the cargo cult. As towards the sky and the airplanes, their poison darts are bound. So just to explain, cargo cult is a real thing. It's the act of imitating behaviors without understanding how they work, hoping to obtain the same results. So the most striking memorable example occurred after the Pacific War, when the indigenous populations came into contact with armies equipped with considerable resources. Cargo cult took a particular turn. Indigenous people having observed that radio operators for ground troops seemed to obtain the arrival of ships or the airdrop of food and medicine simply by requesting them on their radio transmitters. So the indigenous people decided to imitate them. They built as best they could fake radio operator booths with dummy radios in which they too would request, using fake microphones, the shipment of food, medicine, and other equipment they might need. Later, they even built fake airstrips waiting for planes to unload their cargo, presumably from their ancestral spirits. So they also then start talking about taking the planes down, etc.
Yeah,
so
there's
really,
sort of this if you build it, they will come Field of Dreams mentality to it, right?
It's also this kind of challenging the gods as well, which is really interesting. So just to continue the lyrics, after the guitar solo, where are you, melody, and your lost frame? Is it haunting the archipelago where the sirens are becalmed? This is where the choir comes in. Or is it clinging to the plane whose alarm siren has gone silent? Did you remain? Floating on the currents, have you already found those luminous corals of the Guinean coasts and sailed, where those indigenous sorcerers still hope in vain for planes to be brought to the ground? Having nothing to lose nor a god to believe in, and so they might return my trivial passions, I, like them, call to the night cargo planes. And I hold on to that hope of an aviation disaster that will bring melody back again. A child taken captive by the lure of the stars there. What was your name? Melody. Melody what? Melody Nelson. And then the instrumental. And just to say on that last verse, they talk about this, tangible connection with Melody and yearning for them, even if it means collecting her remains after a plane crash, like cargo for the cult, rather than grappling with the uncertainty of her disappearance. It's a poignant desire for a more earthly presence, as if she had transcended the world, ascending to the lonely stars above, or assumed into heaven like a saint or a virgin. So it's also like this cargo plane through this myth becomes sort of the chariot of the gods.
Yeah.
Rising. So in the original French lyrics, Gainsbourg, renowned for his lyrical trickery, concludes the album's closing track with clever wordplay. He definitely contrasts désastre, which is disaster, with désastres, 2 words, means of the stars. Skillfully encapsulating his longing for a cosmic event that could bring melody back from the celestial allure of the stars, hinting at the possibility that she chose the disaster of not being with him. This adds a profound layer of complexity to the song's emotional narrative. I will say, I don't see how the original album is a 96. I think musically, some of it's decent, some of it is quite that sort of cod, sort of French whimsical, yeah, not much to it. Like a million one songs like that. So yeah, and I was just amazed how no one sort of mentioned the narrative. They kind of just went along with it. Yeah. So yeah, Mick's this album, I listened to this as well. As I say, I'm not a big fan, as you may have gathered. So the so many of the songs didn't really have any pull for me. I mean, it's all done really well, don't get me wrong, and I really like Mick Harvey, and the stuff he does. And I think with this song as well is a great version as well. And you're right, things like the I kind of see it like the celestial choir is really pushed up.
Yeah.
Much more impact. That sort of funky acid soaked guitar for me, it kind of brings in mind sort of like later on Hello Streakers or stuff like that by Jean-Claude Pelletier, which again has its own sort of like cliche to it from the 70s. So yeah, overall, this song's a really good song, but as I say, it's not without its issues.
Yeah, interesting.
I have to be honest and point that out, otherwise I wouldn't be saying what I think.
No, I'm glad you added that. That's something that was omitted when we did the Into the Music episode covering search, which is understandable to some degree, but it is also good to know that this is a situation where if you find yourself enjoying what you hear, you need to remember to separate the art from the artist as best you can. I am a bit more of a fan of his music than it sounds like you probably are, which means I might enjoy listening to the whole of this album a bit more if it was sort of inspired by and taken from Serge's source material, because that would be an interesting go, as was this song, sort of a microcosm of that experience.
Yeah, bear with me a second. I've got it in the vault, as they say. Yeah, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 Mick Harvey albums in the vault. But this one starts off with a version Ich liebe dich, ich liebe dich auch nicht, which again is that sort of Je t'aime, but German, and somebody pretending to be Jane Birkin as well. I never really liked that song either. But yeah, there's some interesting stuff in here, definitely. and it's well worth checking out, particularly if you're more of a fan of Gainsbourg and higher.
Yeah.
Just to circle it back to Mr. Harvey, he has released 12 studio albums, 8 soundtrack albums, and has produced numerous albums of various people, including co-producing both PJ Harvey albums, Stories from the City, Stories from the Sea, and Let England Shake, which is no coincidence that both of those were the ones that won the Mercury Music Prize. So yeah, he has got a deft touch.
Yeah,
That is
clearly very
concerned.
accomplished. You know, he's so much more than just this contributor to, you know,
Yeah.
Nick Cave's material and other artists, which was sort of my base understanding of his, you know, musical career. So this is great to know that he's got all this other stuff and he's accomplished almost as much as some of those with whom he has collaborated in the past.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, this is a really interesting track. Great shout by Neil. So I shall wrap things up. Thanks for listening, Sandy. Thanks
You.
again, Neil, for suggesting it. Folks out there, please tell us what you think of this track. Obviously of Mr. Harvey himself and of Mr. Gainsbourg and his predilections. So yeah, really interested to hear what you guys think. This is a quality song though. There's no getting away from that. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. We really appreciate everybody to support the channel. So join us. And if you have a track you'd like us to listen to, then just simply drop a comment in any episode. We see it, and if at least one of us hasn't heard it before, we'll add it to the list, and then we will get down that goddamn list when we're good and ready. At some point in the future, when we're living underground after the nuclear war, the start of the Gulf. So yeah, that being said, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see all of you on the next episode of the Audiophiles.
See you later, guys.